What's going on, summoners? Welcome back to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. My name is Kangas, and today we're going to talk about some mechanics that only the best players use to their advantage. This video is all about the micro game, so if you're looking for things to actively practice right away, you're in the right place. Now let's get into it.
Some of the mechanics that we're going to talk about are pretty situational, but they can be the deciding factor when you're in a close fight. Other mechanics will give you more control over the game, helping you get out of sticky situations or just get that extra burst of damage. Working on your individual skill is the best way to see improvement quickly, and we're here to give you some things to work on. Before we talk about these 7 mechanics, our question of the day is, which mechanics in Wild Rift do you think is the most OP? Personally, I hate playing around invisibility in the game just because I always forget champions exist until they appear in front of me, but let me know yours in the comments down below. Okay, so let's start off with the mechanic that really pushes the limits of the map and terrain in the game. Flash covers a good amount of distance, but you can actually cover more space if you understand how big some of the walls are in Wild Rift. If you flash into a little over halfway in the middle of a wall, you can actually push the limits of flash and jump to the other side. For example, you can actually flash over the wall that separates Dragon Lane from the River Bush. This is also true for blink abilities like Ezreal's Arcane Shift. This also works when you're trying to place wards, but it's a bit tricky if you have ward assist enabled in the options, so you should turn this setting off. Otherwise, the ward placement works the same as your flash placement. We suggest you take some time to go around the map in Practice Tool and try out flashing over different walls. Once you get comfortable, you'll always have an escape route if you're getting chased. It's a really good feeling when you get over a big wall and your opponent hasn't practiced it, so they just flash in place. Not only can you run away from enemies, but you can actually get some insane gank angles to surprise your enemy. It's easy to flash over one of the walls near every outer turret and just tower dive a low health opponent. Remember, you should use your flash whenever you see a good opportunity. Wild Rift is all about outplaying your opponent, and if you can cover extra distance when needed, you'll always have an advantage over the people who didn't practice. So now that you know how to cover more distance, let's talk about using mobility to its highest effect. Some movement abilities act differently depending on what kind of CC affects them. For example, you can pull a Tristana that's in the middle of her rocket jump, but if she rocket jumps exactly as she gets hit by the blitz hook, she'll actually tank the hook but still jump to her destination. It's a bit weird to explain, but every single crowd control ability in the game applies the crowd control at a different point. Some abilities like Ezreal's Arcane Shift, Tristana's Rocket Jump, and Jarvan's Flag Toss combo will react to CC differently depending on when they were hit. This can give you a big advantage and effectively force a stun or knockup to hit you after the animation goes off. This is the same thing that happens when you kill somebody, but their flash still goes off. Your damage will always deal damage if it lands, but you can delay it if you do it right. Once you master this mechanic, you can seriously bait some utility from the enemy team. If you can bait Blitzcrank's hook and waste it, it'll give your team a time to start the fight. It's also just a good skill to have in the back of your head. Now moving away from mobility skills, one of the most important mechanics that the best players use is called orb walking. The term originated in Dota, and now it's most commonly used when talking about kiting enemies. You can do this by canceling the end of your auto attack animation, giving you more time to reposition yourself. Even though auto attack canceling is used primarily by marksmen, every champion can use it. At the highest levels of play, every single player moves at the end of their auto attacks to make themselves less predictable. If you want to practice on your own, the best way is to stop yourself from holding the auto attack button when you're fighting the enemy. It's easier to just fight automatically, but it also makes your movement extremely predictable. If you're playing a champion that builds a lot of attack speed, you won't even move if you hold down the auto attack button. Try instead to tap the button while you're moving around, matching your taps with the rhythm of your attack speed. It's way easier to practice this in the beginning of the game, so do that whenever you can. This also works with melee champions, and it's crucial if you want to clear the jungle without losing a ton of health. And as always, don't get discouraged if you don't get the hang of it right away. It takes some time to practice, but trust me, it's definitely worth the effort. Soon you'll have complete control over your movement, and it'll be easy to dodge skill shots instead of just auto-pathing into them. But before we talk about our next mechanic, you gotta check out our Wild Rift Discord. You can talk about game balance or just find friends to queue up with. Sometimes it's hard to find duo partners or just full teams, but in our Discord, you'll find a bunch of other people that love the game as much as you do, so click on the link in the description down below. Okay, so we talked about animation canceling your auto attack, so it shouldn't be surprised that the next mechanic is called ability canceling. Doing this well is what makes the best players better than the good players. This is one mechanic that'll become even more important as new champions are added to the game. League of Legends has some really ability cancel heavy champions like Riven, and you'll need to learn these champions' specific mechanics if you want to excel at that champ. For this reason, it's worth practicing canceling your abilities when possible. A lot of champions in Wild Rift can already cancel their abilities with other abilities, saving you time in between camps. For example, you can use your Essence Flux right before you Arcane Shift to make the damage from both abilities apply instantly. Not only will this surprise your opponent, you can increase the damage if you do it and cut the lag in between casts. And with champions like Akali, you can cancel the dash from your Shuriken flip with your ultimate, instantly dealing a bunch of damage and also covering a lot of space. If your main has a lot of ability cancels, it's really important for you to learn how to use your abilities properly. The best way to practice is just by trying it out against actual players. You might mess up sometimes, but it'll be worth it when you win a 1v1 because of how well you can cancel your animations. Now that we've talked about both the animation canceling mechanics, we can talk about weaving in auto attacks between spells. This is especially important in the early game, where your auto attacks do a lot of damage no matter who you're playing. I've noticed that a lot of players don't auto attack if they're playing a mage character, and they often just get bullied during the laning phase. Think of using your auto attack button as a way to cancel the ending animation of your abilities. Some champions need to do this constantly in order to output the highest amount of damage, kind of like Ezreal. You need to weave in autos in between your Mystic Shot, otherwise you're missing out on a lot of extra damage. It's also the best way to dodge skill shots since it'll make your movement much harder to predict. This one is one of the hardest mechanics to fully grasp, and it'll require you to comfortably cancel the animations of your attacks and abilities. Think of it as a way to clean up your gameplay. Your mechanics will only get better if you use them in games, so try this out whenever possible. Once you get the hang of it, it'll be really noticeable when you face somebody who isn't as skilled as you. You'll win lane more often, and your outplay potential is higher throughout the game. The next mechanic that we'll talk about is related to a specific active ability, Quicksilver Enchantment. QSS is one of the best boot enchantments in the game, and it can save you from a lot of sticky situations. Most people know that you can QSS out of stuns, but you can actually get out of any crowd control that's in the game. This actually means that you can escape any knockup, giving you time to get out of Malphite's ult before the enemy misfortune kills you. Really good players will time their use of QSS with the exact moment that the CC hits, making it look like they didn't even get hit at all. It's pretty hard to practice this unless you and a friend want to jump into a custom game, but it is worth it if you're struggling dodging skill shots. Aside from getting out of hard crowd control, QSS has some other effects that you should know about if you want to master the enchantment. If Fizz marks you with his ultimate, you can actually QSS to drop the fish on the ground, but be careful since it'll still summon the shark at that location. You can also QSS out of Yasuo's ultimate, but again, the damage will still go through. If you want to get out of Blitz's hook, you can actually QSS to escape it at any point, but remember that you need to be quick about it to avoid the following knockup. When you're confident in your reactions, you can actually start a fight by baiting the enemy to engage on you. For example, getting hit by an Ashe ult usually means that you're dead, but if you QSS out of it, the enemy won't have their best engage tool anymore and might just be baited into the fight already. This is a great time for your team to turn, and you'll find yourself winning more games when you bait the enemy this way. The last mechanic that we'll talk about isn't actually for a combat advantage, but instead, you'll be able to influence the minions in the lane to go in your favor. The best players are able to manipulate how any two waves will push, but that would take a lot longer than just one video to explain. So for now, let's talk about a specific mechanic in wave manipulation called minion aggro management. When we say minion aggro, we just mean whatever target a specific wave is focusing. When two untouched waves crash, the melee minions will start fighting each other, while the caster minions semi-randomly decide on a target to focus. If you're there before your opponent, you can actually force all of the melee minions to attack you, which will make the caster minions focus you as well. Right before your wave arrives, you can then move into a lane brush to make every minion lose aggro at once. This means that they'll start focusing on their next closest minion. With this wave mechanic, you can force the enemy minions to kill yours much faster since they'll usually target the same ones, meaning you can keep the wave in a much better spot for you. If the enemy is too slow getting to the lane, you can even make them lose out on gold and experience. Try this out if you want to set up an easy gank for your jungler, and it's a good idea to communicate this to your team if you want to play a certain way. In the late game, you can even do this to set up waves for your team to farm safely. Make sure you don't try and tank the wave in front of your lane opponent though, because otherwise they'll just fight you with all their minions.
And that's the end of our list of mechanics that only the really good players know about. These small mechanics might not seem like much, but they add up to a lot of complexity in the Wild Rift. That's why animation canceling is so important. It's a couple of small mechanics that work together to give you a much bigger advantage. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to sub to the channel, and also don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss out on future content. Our Discord is also linked in the description down below, so come hang out. Anyway, best of luck on the Rift, and I'll see you in the next one.